Brian Zahnd is the pastor of Word of Life Church in St. Joseph, Missouri, and author of Unconditional, as well as his newest release, Beauty Will Save the World. Welcome back to the Harvest Show, one of my favorite guests to have here
Drew.
On the Harvest Show, a pastor of a great church. And today, we want to talk a little bit about something that maybe a little bit in the book, but not necessarily what the book is about. Talk a little eschatology. First of all, for just the layperson, kind of explain what eschatology is before we get into it.
Eschatology means the study of the end, where this thing is headed, where we are going. Does history have, does it make sense? Is it headed somewhere? And if so, where is it headed?
Yeah.
The Christian faith is an eschatological faith. We believe that this is headed in a definite direction, and we are part of something that is moving toward a culmination.
Now, most Western American Christians, evangelicals, if you want to put it that way, they're familiar with the Left Behind series, which is, you know, dispensationalism, that kind of thing from John Darby.
A novel interpretation of eschatology that's about 150 years old.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the book of Revelation. How are we, first of all, to approach it? Because it's kind of a wild book. I know that people like Martin Luther, John Calvin, they didn't even want to have anything to do with the book of Revelation, thought it was almost unbiblical.
Yeah, they were completely intimidated by it. I look at the book of Revelation like this. First of all, it's using a genre. It is operating within a certain style of literature called Jewish apocalyptic literature.
Okay, explain that.
Well, it's a style that uses fantastic images, that we might say is cartoonish, that is exaggerating certain aspects to make a point.
Yeah.
And I think the best description I can give of the book of Revelation is that it is a prophetic critique of empire. John is writing, John the Revelator, whether it's John the Apostle or a different John, we're not clear on that. It just says John. So we'll say John the Revelator is writing at the end of the first century. The Christian faith is taking root. Little congregations are springing up throughout the empire, but they are in the midst of a very large, wealthy, idolatrous, militaristic empire.
Rome had conquered everything.
They had conquered everything. They ruled the known world, the Mediterranean world that the church was nascent within. And so John is writing this incredibly poetic, prophetic critique of this empire, speaking of it in terms of being a beast, which is anti-God or anti-Christ. But he has this wonderful, humorous aspect. At one point, John is envisioned as caught up before the throne of God. And he sees this scroll that apparently is how history is to play out, but it's sealed with 7 seals. And no man is found worthy to break the seals. But then he begins to weep because of this, because it looks like God's purpose for humanity will not be fulfilled. But then the elder says, "Oh, don't weep, John. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah has overcome, and he's worthy to break the seals." And John says, "Where?" And he looks, looking for a lion.
A lion.
And instead he sees a little lamb. That's the Greek. It's a little lamb. It's a little lamb as if just been slain. It's been slain, but it's standing. It's been killed, but it's standing up. It's resurrected. Anastasis, to stand again. It's a slain but resurrected little lamb. And so you have this parade of these monstrous beasts. You see it first in Daniel. You have a variation of it in Revelation. But then the message is that this little lamb, slain but resurrected, is somehow going to conquer all of these imperial beasts.
Yeah.
And so John is writing to people at that time. They would get the imagery. They would understand that it's somewhat, he's using poetic language to kind of conceal. He doesn't want to just come right out and say, you know, that Nero, he was a beast.
Yeah.
So it's kind of encoded language, as it were, but it's speaking to people of that time. So I say it this way: Revelation is not written about Americans in the 21st century, but it's for us.
Yeah.
We can interpret it. We can see how it speaks to us now. It speaks to us. It's for us, but it's not about us.
And I like the way, and you talk about prophecy some in your book, that if you look at the book of Revelation, you got this first century guy sitting in prison. He's writing to 7 specific churches in Asia Minor.
These are churches he probably founded.
Yeah. he's writing to these guys. I mean, it seems a little unrealistic that he's predicting exact events that are going to happen in a 21st century nation state, because those churches then, in the first century, Asia Minor, would they be reading it going,
it would be like writing
what are you talking about?
Dear Church at Philadelphia and Laodicea and Ephesus, etc., I know you're going through a hard time, you're under pressure from the empire, but don't worry about that, because 20 centuries from now, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
No, he is writing to people in a particular situation. The thing is, that situation repeats itself throughout history. There are always these powerful, wealthy, militaristic empires that think they have a right to rule nations and shape history according to their agenda, that are rising up and then find themselves in conflict with God. And how does God deal with that? That's the story and the message of Revelation.
And why is all this even important? Why is eschatology important? I think, for me, part of it is that if we see God as ready to smite and destroy planet Earth, why should we care about saving it? Why should we care about climate change or things like that? Whereas if our mission is to reconcile the earth to God, then all of a sudden our focus becomes quite different.
The blessed hope is not we're going, but He's coming.
Yeah.
And our prayer is, Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Now, we understand that we will not have the fulfilled accomplishment of the reign of God on earth prior to the coming of Christ. But we who confess Christ are to be a prophetic people, in that we are to seek to embody a future that has not yet arrived. We are to be from the future.
So we're kind of living between two eras or two ions.
We live in the tension of the now and not yet.
Yeah.
Is the kingdom here now? Yes, it's here, but it's not fully here. But we dare not say, well, the kingdom hasn't come, so we can just keep living according to the ethos of Babylon and Egypt and Rome. No. We belong to this kingdom that has come, is coming, and will come.
Yeah.
Do I have time to give this illustration about okay, you go to a movie, and before you see the actual movie, they show what we call the previews or the trailer. It's not the entire movie, but it gives you a glimpse of what the movie is going to be like. All right. In this present age, the church is to be the preview of the age to come.
Yeah.
And so we are to examine, well, we are to think, where is this thing headed? And then within our own communities, that is our churches, we are to embody where this thing is headed. So for example, in 1850, Birmingham, Alabama, conservative Bible-believing Christians were holding on to the idea that slavery was compatible with the purposes of God, because they could find things in the Bible where Paul would say, slaves,
like it, yeah.
Obey your masters and stuff like that. But if they had asked themselves this question, in the age to come, will slavery continue? They would be forced to admit, no, not in the age to come. Well, then what we need to say is we need to be from the future.
Yeah.
We need to embody where this thing is headed. So, if we, for example, will say that war is to be abolished in the age to come, then within the Christian community, we should begin to prophetically embody that by saying among us,
we have turned our plowshares into...
that Christ has already abolished war.
Yeah.
And we live within His community.
So what does it mean then to be prophetic? I think most average churchgoers would define prophecy as, predictions that I'm going to predict there's going to be an earthquake or an attack, or what is prophecy all about?
Look, if you want me to predict, I'll predict Christ shall come again to judge the living and the dead. That's my prediction.
Yeah.
But to be prophetic is to have an alternative imagination concerning how life can be lived that is inspired by the Holy Spirit through Holy Scripture.
Yeah.
It's an alternative imagination. Powerful nations, superpowers, empires, if you will, want to conscript everything, including even imagination.
Yeah.
And that's why the poets always get in trouble with emperors, because the emperors and empires want to say this is the only way that life can be arranged. And the poet says, well, I can imagine 10 different ways that life could be. And so Isaiah is imagining, what if life was like this? And so a simple thought experiment might be to ask yourself, what would life look like if God were really in charge? Oh, well, I think this would be different. I think we would care for people in this way. There wouldn't be any more of that. In fact, you can ask yourself, as we come into the age to come, what things will be abolished, what things will remain, and what things will be altered. And then to the extent we can, understanding that it's limited, we should seek to abolish those things that will be abolished. We should seek to maintain those things that will be maintained. We should seek to alter those things that should be altered. And by doing that, we are a prophetic people. In other words, the wider society should be able to look at
the church and say that's what it's going to be.
I see where this thing is headed. It's going to be something like that. But unfortunately, too often the church simply acquiesces to the wider culture, adopts the same values of the empire with a little bit of religious flourish added to it.
Yeah. And I think that it's really interesting how we seem to declare Jesus as Lord. Most Christians would agree. They'd say, well, yeah, that's an important part of becoming a Christian, so to speak, is to say Jesus is Lord. But yet, we don't necessarily seem to really mean that. We think that, well, Jesus will be Lord someday, but right now He's Lord, but He's not really in charge.
Yeah. Jesus is Lord of my personal life.
Yeah.
No, Jesus is Lord.
Yeah.
That is the outlandish Christian confession that Jesus is Lord, and we are calling the nations now to begin to live under His Lordship here and now.
Well, the book is Beauty Will Save the World. The author is Brian Zahnd. To connect with Brian, you can go to his website, brianzahnd.com, or his church's website, wolc.com. Or if you can't remember those, you can go to our website, harvest-tv.com, click on Show Info in the menu bar for an easy link back to his website. We'll be right back after this.